Fellow students, let us discuss about the beginning of the French Revolution. We will discuss about the division of French society in the 18th century. We will also discuss about the structure of feudal society, the privileges enjoyed by the first and second estate, and also discuss the plight of the third estate. Revolution is a fundamental change in political power or organizational structures that take place in a relatively short period of time when people revolt against the existing authorities. French Revolution, a beginning. French Revolution marks a beginning of a new era of humanity. It began on 14 July 1789, which brought a major change in the course of modern history, leading to a decline of monarchies in the world and replacing them with republics and liberal democracies. The message of liberty, equality and fraternity was given to the world by the French Revolution. It also gave the concept of democratic politics to most of the countries in the world, along with the true meaning of nationalism. Let us study about the social and economic conditions of late 18th century France, which were changed by the French Revolution and proved to be one of the causes of the French Revolution. French society in the 18th century. The French society that we see today was quite different from late 18th century France. It was a society based on feudal order, also known as old regime. The term which is used here is feudal society. The term feudal came from the Latin word feudum or feudal estate, a social system existing in medieval Europe in which people worked and fought for nobles who gave them protection and land in return. The manor life of French society. By the term manor, we mean a dwelling place, which nowadays is associated with a luxurious lifestyle, of which 18th century nobles lived. Manorial system, legal and economic power held by the lord of a manor. Manorial system was an essential element of feudal society. It was based on the rural economy that originated in the villa system of France. Manorial system was characterized by the legal and economic power held by the lord of a manor. Lord was economically supported from direct land holdings and from the contribution of the peasants. The lord was supported economically from his own direct land holding in a manner sometimes called a fief, and from the obligatory contributions of the peasant population who fell under the jurisdiction of the lord and his court. These obligations could be payable in several ways: in labor, in kind, or on rare occasions in cash. The working system of the manor, domain, part directly controlled by the lord. This was the land which was controlled by the lord and used for the benefit of his household and dependents. Vilain. This was the labor services given by the peasants. The dependents or the serf holdings carrying the obligation that the peasant household supply the lord with specified labor services or a part of its output. Free peasant land under the control of the lord of the manor. The free peasant land without obligation but otherwise subject to manorial jurisdiction and custom and owing land revenue fixed at the time of the lease. Additional sources of income of the lord. The additional sources of income for the lord included charges for use of this mill, bakery or wine press, or for the right to hunt or to let pigs feed in his woodland, as well as court revenues and single payments in each change of tenant. On the other side of the account, manorial administration involved significant expenses due to which the smaller manors tended to rely less on villein tenure. It was an area or territory given to the feudal lord by the king as a reward to the noble or feudal lord. Privileges and rights of the feudal lords. The feudal lords enjoyed privileges and rights over the territory, which slowly became a hereditary right. The right of inheritance was given to the lord by the royal charter. Division of feudal society. The feudal society was divided into 3 estates. Here, estates means a major social class or order of persons regarded collectively as part of the political body of the country and possessing distinct political rights. On the top of this social order was the king, followed by the clergy in the first estate. Nobility was the second estate, and the rest of the population constituted the third estate. All the three estates were bounded by economic ties known as manorialism. This order is often referred to as feudal society. Feudal society of France. It was a society based on inequality, where the first two estates had all the rights and privileges and nothing much was left for the third estate. Let us see what privileges were enjoyed by the first two estates, which they considered as their divine right. Privileges enjoyed by the first and second estates. Basic rights. The 18th century France vested all the privileges and rights for the first two estates. Landowners, they constituted 9% of the population and owned approximately 60% of the land. Third was the tax exemptions. The members of the first two estates, that is, the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. The most important of these was exemption from paying taxes to the state. Fourth, feudal privileges. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. These included feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. Fifth, tax on agricultural produce. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes, which comprised of 1/10 of agricultural produce from the peasants. Sixth were indirect taxes. A number of indirect taxes were also levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt or tobacco. Seventh, control over high rank positions. They controlled all high ranking positions in the army and the administration. 8. Special treatment in court and punishments. They received special treatment in court and also in terms of punishment. The first estate could only be prosecuted in their own church courts rather than the king's court. The punishments in these courts were often less harsh than in the king's court. For example, there was no death penalty. Ninth, exemption from military and monetary service. Members of the first estate also could not be asked to perform military service, to house troops or to provide money for the support of royal troops. 10th, exemption from labour services. The first and second estates were also exempted from the corvée, a labour tax where men had to work to mend the roads. Lifestyle of the nobles in the French society. Lifestyle of the nobility was of a grandeur style. They imitated the royal family. Their houses were no less than the places of royalty. Many of the feudal lords had assumed their supremacy in the local areas and took all privileges as their birthright. The third estate of the French society. The third estate consisted of big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers and peasants. The third estate was the largest estate, containing around 27 million people, or 98% of the nation, which included every citizen who did not possess a noble title and was not ordained by the church. Being a large group, the third estate was marked by considerable diversity. Members of the third estate. It housed many different classes and levels of wealth, many different professions and ideas, rural, urban and provincial people, like members of the third estate ranged from lowly beggars and struggling peasants to urban artisans and labourers, from the shopkeepers and commercial middle classes to the nation's wealthiest merchants and capitalists. Condition of the third estate. Despite its enormous size and importance to the nation, the third estate was politically disregarded and economically exploited by the old regime. The frustrations, grievances and sufferings of the third estate ultimately gave rise to the French Revolution. Serfdom. Almost 90% of the population of medieval Europe were serfs or peasants. Serfs were regular village people who, in return for protection and a place to live, were required to cultivate the land and perform other jobs that were asked by the lord, due to which sometimes it was also called serfdom. Status of serfs. Serfdom was the status of peasants under feudalism, specifically relating to manorialism. It was a condition of bondage that developed primarily during the Middle Ages in Europe. Serfs who occupied a plot of land were required to work for the lord of the manor who owned that land, and in return were entitled to protection, justice and the right to exploit certain fields within the manor to maintain their own subsistence. Serfs were often required to work on not only the lord's fields, but also in mines, forests and roads. The manor formed the basic unit of feudal society, and the lord of a manor and his serfs were bound legally, economically and socially. Serfs formed the lowest class of feudal society. Peasants in third estate. Peasants were at the bottom of the third estate's social hierarchy. Peasants comprised between 82 and 88% of the population and were the nation's poorest social class. Though levels of wealth varied, even within the peasantry, it is reasonable to suggest that most French peasants were poor. A very small percentage of peasants owned land in their own right, so were able to live independently as yeoman farmers who farmed their own land. The plight of the third estate. 1. They were treated like slaves. Serfs could be compared with slaves. They were forced to work on the land of the manor and could not leave without the permission from the lord of the land. However, unlike slaves, serfs could not be bought, sold or traded by the masters. Second, treated like servants. Peasants were obliged to render services to the lord, to work in his house and fields, to serve in the army or to participate in building roads. Third, they were forced to do military service. It was often peasants who performed military service, which made it extremely difficult for their families to cope in wartime. Fourth, the only taxpayers in the French society. The burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was thus borne by the third estate alone. The sufferings of the serf can be further understood from the following poem. The Serf. The serf. I am a serf, weakest in the land of naught. I am a slave to all, from the lowest serpent to the loftiest dream. I am a serf. I and my kind stand like men, but oft this is only an illusion. Because we stand not together, we stand not at all. I am a serf. I live blind, deaf and dumb, in ignorance and fear of the truth. Not because I can't, but because I won't have it any other way. I am a serf, redeemable only because I am all that there is, but for only as long as I am all that there is. I am a serf. I and my kind are producers. All things made, great and small, come from our ranks. Recapitulate. Let us recapitulate of what has been taught. The French Revolution started because of the disparities among the people in the feudal society. Some privileges were enjoyed by the upper two estates, whereas those who belonged to the third estate had to bear the burden of paying the taxes. In the next lecture, we will understand the economic hardships faced by the working class. Moreover, we will also study about the contributions of various philosophers in the French Revolution. Thank you.